I frequently say that if you can play classical music well and if you can play jazz well, that sort of puts you in a sort of situation where there's not really anything that you can't play, right? Because because those traditions are so they're deep traditions, and there's a lot of really challenging repertoire, uh, to get to, and so it's like so you're working out all these, you know, technical issues, um, and another thing is, I've encountered some great players that don't, never played, classical, and sometimes I can be surprised by that, but because of the way that they play, there's a certain kind of technical precision in their playing that usually lets me know that there was at least at one period of time that was some serious classical, a repertoire that was, that was worked out. But actually, you can accomplish that by just practicing the universal, the universal components of music, which is rudiments, right? So scales, arpeggios, um, scales and thirds, opposing scales, all kinds of different scales, full range scales. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff
What's that? Orange?
Yeah.
I don't even know that.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of stuff to practice that doesn't necessarily belong to classical or to jazz, but it's just the stuff that if you can't play this stuff, then there's no music that you can play. You can't play anything, right? So you have to get that stuff together. And when I started young, and my dad was my teacher all the way until I went to college, and so we did stuff by ear. We did stuff that was, etudes and stuff out of books, exercise books, and we did classical and we did jazz. And so that's always been sort of the thing for me. It's always been, um, as a saxophone player, we talk about being able to play both sides of the horn, so to speak. And now, there are no gigs for a classical saxophonist.
Oh, yeah. Also in America, also in probably everywhere.
Yeah, there's not many gigs for
There
the
are some
classical
wedding gigs.
saxophonist.
There are some wedding gigs, isn't it?
Oh yeah, right. I mean, I'm sure you can find something every once in a while, but the point
Right.
is that you're going to be hungry for for most of the
That's
time.
right.
Homeless for most of the time, and then every once in a while, you know.
But it's not for the love, not for the money.
That's right. That's right.
Both sides.
That's right. Um, uh, and in my career, because of that, the jazz and commercial stuff, that stuff really took off, and so that's what most of my career has been. But I never sort of lost that love of classical music,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the value in in my composition. Um, the stuff that I enjoy composing and arranging the most is sort of hybrid works, music that has classical and jazz components.
Wow.
Um, and that's the stuff
I
that.
want to listen to it. Where can I listen to that?
Oh, well, and there's actually a pretty good collection of stuff. Now, I have a recording out called Sacramental,
Sacramento.
and that was 6 compositions that I wrote for chamber orchestra and jazz quartet.
That is amazing. Oh my God. Orchestra. How did you arrange that actually? Because I
Yeah,
am.
so what I tried to do is I tried to capitalize on the usual strengths of classical musicians, the
Mhm.
usual strengths of jazz musicians, and I wrote the music in such a way that everybody was doing something that they we're natively going to be good at. You know, one of the challenges when you try to do like jazz with strings, for instance, is string players don't usually swing very well. So when you're trying to write lines and things,
it is
it's
hard
like,
to swing on the strings instrument, I guess.
I mean, now there are some string players like Christian Howes, for instance. He's, you know, I don't know, he might be the greatest jazz violinist alive or something. He swings, he can swing, and there's a few that they can do that, but most string players don't have like significant jazz or commercial experience. It's all classical training.
Right.
And so stuff like developing your swing feel, that's not something that they're ever going to probably do.
Right.
And so it would have been maybe silly for me to write a bunch of stuff for the string players to be swinging if I wanted it to sound authentic, if I wanted it to still sound like jazz. And so, you know, but classical players tend to be very technically sound. Stuff like great intonation, great facility over there, you know, over the range of the instrument. So I could write all of this really challenging, you know, acrobatic kind of stuff, and they can nail that stuff all day long. And then for the jazz players, you know, players that were also very technically proficient because of the nature of the material, but also great improvisers.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, and so then you could have all this sort of interesting interaction between the two.
Oh my God! Now I really want to hear your album. Then is it on Spotify?
Oh, say it again.
Is it on Spotify?
I don't know if it's on Spotify. It was on what is it, iTunes and like Napster and stuff like that. It was on those platforms for a period of time. I kind of let that stuff. I let it expire, you know. But I'll send you something. I'll send you something.
Please.
So we'll work that out. But you know, Charlie Parker with strings.
Oh my God.
For instance, right? So Charlie Parker with strings is like, that's one of those things where you're bringing traditionally classical instruments together with jazz instrumentalists, right? And so you have great improvisers with, you know, sort of great technicians, you know, and the writing of all that material sort of is pretty sensitive towards what the strengths are. And that's why that stuff sounds so great.
Right.
You know? And, you know, Charlie Parker kind of got that whole thing started. Yeah, there were some projects prior to Charlie Parker with strings, but the Charlie Parker with strings collection, that's what made everybody after that
was very successful. I remember I read in somewhere that album got really big and successful, right? Charlie Parker with strings.
Yeah, we did something at Ohio State a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. The pandemic has totally screwed up my sense of time, like my perception of how much time has gone by.
Same
but
here.
Yeah, I guess it was 3 years ago, and we did 12 of those original arrangements, the actual arrangements from the recordings. And that was killing. I was pinching myself the whole time.